Go your own way and learn from other people's mistakes. This is a story which teaches you to appreciate what you have. Raven tugged at the straps of her black backpack, the straps worn and fraying from years of overuse. Her parents' voices still echoed in her mind as she walked down the cracked pavement of her neighborhood, blending into the symphony of barking dogs, distant sirens, and murmuring wind. "Rock isn't good for you, Raven," her mom had said that morning. "He's dragging you down." Her dad had chimed in, his face lined with frustration. "You deserve better than some loser who gambles his life away." Raven had stormed out, slamming the door behind her. They didn't understand her love for Rock, or what she thought was love. Yes, he had his flaws, but he made her feel alive in a way nothing else did. Raven was a striking teenager with a presence that demanded attention, even when she tried to blend into the background. Her jet black hair fell in uneven layers, dyed tips streaked with deep purple, a rebellious homage to her need for individuality. Her hazel eyes, sharp and expressive, seemed to hold both defiance and curiosity, reflecting the inner turmoil she rarely let show. She had a habit of narrowing her gaze, as though perpetually questioning the world around her. Raven's demeanor was tough, but it wasn't impenetrable. Beneath her sarcastic quips and rolled eyes was a girl who felt deeply, though she'd learned to mask her vulnerabilities behind a wall of bravado. She walked with purpose, even when she didn't know where she was going, her heavy boots making a rhythmic thud on the pavement. Now, as she wandered aimlessly through the city streets, her heavy boots scuffing the ground, she stared at the graffiti-covered walls and thought about her life her parents wanted for her. Straight A's, college, a future. But none of that seemed to fit her. She crossed into the heart of the city where the streets buzzed with energy. Vendors shouted out deals, street performers juggled or played guitars, and the aroma of roasted chestnuts wafted through the air. At the corner of a busy intersection, the smell of freshly baked bagels drew her in. A cart sat nestled between two storefronts, its canopy striped red and white. Behind the cart, a woman with kind eyes and floor-dusted hands was arranging bagels on a tray. She noticed Raven lingering nearby. "Would you like a bagel?" Raven shrugged, pulling a crumpled bill from her pocket. "Sure." The woman handed her a warm sesame bagel, its golden crust soft and inviting. As Raven took a bite, the woman's wistful expression caught her attention. "You seem sad," Raven said, her voice muffled by the mouthful of bagel. The woman smiled faintly. "Not sad, really, just reflective. This wasn't what I dreamed of doing, you know." Raven tilted her head. "What was your dream?" "To be a chef," the woman said, her voice tinged with regret. "I wanted to open my own restaurant, but dreams can be tricky. Life gets in the way, fear, responsibilities, bad decisions. Now I sell bagels." Raven looked at the woman, her words settling heavily in her chest. Was Rock one of her bad decisions? She pushed the thought away and continued walking. The city's pulse shifted as she left the busy streets and wandered into quieter neighborhoods. She found herself drawn to the faint sound of a church bell. The tall spire of a Gothic church loomed ahead, its stained glass windows glowing faintly in the late afternoon light. Raven hesitated but pushed open the heavy wooden door. Inside, the cool air and scent of incense wrapped around her like a blanket. Candles flickered along the altar, their light dancing across the vaulted ceiling. A priest was finishing a sermon, his voice resonating in the near-empty space. Raven sat at the back, listening without really understanding the words. When the congregation trickled out, she approached the priest. The priest was a man in his early 40s, with a face that bore the weight of unspoken struggles and years of quiet devotion. His short dark hair was flecked with strands of silver, giving him an air of both wisdom and wariness. His sharp cheekbones and defined jawline hinted at a younger self that might have been carefree and hopeful, a stark contrast to the solemnity etched into his features now. His eyes, a deep shade of brown, were thoughtful and penetrating, as if he could see through facades to the truths people tried to hide. There was a warmth in his gaze, but it was tinged with sadness, a reflection of the internal conflict he carried. His movements were deliberate and calm, the kind of practiced composure that came from years of guiding others through their pain while quietly suppressing his own. "You looked conflicted," she said, surprising herself with the observation. The priest chuckled, his eyes wary but kind. "You're perceptive." "Yes, I suppose I am. I've fallen in love with someone, a woman. But as a priest, I've made vows to the church. My heart is torn." Raven frowned, her rebellious streak flaring. "Why not just follow your heart? Isn't love the whole point of life?" The priest looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. "Perhaps you're right," he said softly. "But walking away from your commitments isn't always easy." She left the church feeling both vindicated and unsettled. Love seemed simple to her. Why complicate it? As the sun dipped low, casting the city in hues of orange and gold, a thick fog began to roll in. Raven wandered toward the river, where the world felt quieter. Under a graffiti-streaked bridge, she spotted a huddled figure wrapped in a tattered blanket. The man's gaunt face turned toward her as she approached. It was a man in his late 50s, though this haggard appearance made him look older. His face, weathered by years of hardship, was a map of deep lines and sunken hollows that spoke of a life once filled with promise and now consumed by regret. His unkempt beard was streaked with gray, and his thinning hair hung in uneven strands, pushed back from his forehead as though in an attempt to cling to some semblance of dignity. Despite his wrecked state, there was an unmistakable sharpness in his eyes, a piercing blue that seemed to cut through the fog of his present circumstances. Those eyes were windows to a brilliant mind, once celebrated and now clouded by sorrow and self-loathing. His gaze shifted between haunted and hopeful, as if part of him still clung to the memory of the man he used to be. He wore a threadbare trench coat that had clearly seen better days, its pockets bulging with random items he'd collected, scraps of paper, a broken pen, and perhaps the remnants of a life he could no longer call his own. His shoes, mismatched and scuffed, barely held together, evidence of the miles he had walked with nowhere to go. "Young lady," he rasped, his voice rough from years of hardship, "don't waste your life." She stopped, taken aback. "What do you mean?" The man gestured to himself, his bony hands trembling. "I was once a professor, had everything, a career, a family, a home. But my family was cruel, and I turned to gambling to cope. It consumed me. I lost it all." Despite his circumstances, the professor still had an aura of intellectualism, a flicker of his former self that hadn't entirely been extinguished. His speech was peppered with insights and reflections that hinted at the depth of his knowledge, even as his current reality mocked it. There was a tragic nobility about him, a man who had soared to great heights only to crash, now sitting beneath a bridge with nothing but his memories and the fog to keep him company. To Raven, he was both a warning and a reminder of what could be lost when choices, no matter how small, spiral out of control. Raven sat behind him, the fog curling around them like ghostly tendrils. "So what should I do?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Appreciate what you have," he said, his eyes glinting with both pain and wisdom. "A good family is rare. Don't let anger blind you to their love." His words lingered as Raven made her way home, the city lights glowing faintly through the fog. When she opened the door, her parents were waiting, their faces a mix of relief and concern. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, surprising them both. I've been thinking." In the week that followed, Raven tried to bring Rock along on her newfound path. She urged him to quit gambling, to quit smoking, to be better, but Rock resisted, laughing off her attempts. "You've changed," he said one evening, his tone dismissive. "Maybe I have," Raven replied, her voice steady. Eventually she let him go, her heart heavy but her mind clear. The lessons of the bagel seller, the torn priest, and the fallen professor guided her now. She wasn't perfect, but she was finding her way, and that was enough.